Hello everyone and welcome to chapter 12 DDL data definition language create, alter and drop table. This chapter is divided into 8 lessons: DDL create table statement, column data types, table constraints, not null and check constraints, table constraints unique and primary key constraints, table constraints foreign keys, create table with subquery, DDL alter table statement, and the last lesson DDL drop table statement. Here in the first lesson we are going to learn how to create a table using create table statement. As we learned before, SQL commands divided into 4 main categories. The first category, which is transaction control language, which is TCL. The second category, which is data control language, DCL, data manipulation language or DML, and the last category, which is DDL or data definition language. Here we are going to learn about some DDL commands like create, alter and drop. DDL statements or data definition language statements are used to create database objects like tables, views, indexes, functions, synonyms, procedures, and so on. They can be used also to alter database objects, drop database objects, and rename database objects. Here in this table, as we can see, we have 5 database objects. We have here a table. The table is the basic unit of storage. It contains rows. The table is used to store business data like, for example, employees information, departments information, countries information, jobs information, and so on. Other objects like view, sequence, index, and synonym will be discussed later on in later chapters. Here we want to define a schema which is a collection of database objects like tables, views, sequences, indexes, synonyms, and owned by a database user. So if we have, for example, a user called HR user, a list of objects, tables, indexes, views, synonyms, for example, owned by this user called HR schema. This is the schema. The schema has the same name as the database user, which is a group of objects owned by this user. So to create a table at the database, we can just simply follow this syntax, create table, and we can specify here the table name, and between braces here we can specify the column definition, the column name, and the data type of each column. Here we can precede the table name with the name of the schema. If you don't specify a schema here, the owner of the table is the user who run the create statement. If you want to assign an owner for the table, we can just precede the table name with the schema name or the owner here. So this is an example how to create a table, create table, and this is the name of the table as we can see, emp underscore new, and between braces here we can specify the columns definition. Here is the column name and the data type as we can see, number of 3. This is the column name, ename, and this is the data type varchar 240, email varchar 250, hire date, the data type is date here as we can see, debt id, and the data type here is number. More about columns data types will be discussed in the next lesson. After create a table, you can check the structure of the table by using, for example, describe command. Describe, and this is the name of the table. As we can see here, the table contains 5 columns. This is the employee number, the employee name, email, hire date, and debt ID, and this is the data type of each column. Another example here, create table, and this is the name of the table, emp underscore retire, between braces here, and we specify the columns definition here. This is the column name and this is the data type of each column. Here we can specify default option. For example, here retired underscore date, the data type is date, default sys date. Here after default option we can specify a default value for the column. The default value here can be function, can be expression, or can be also literal value. Here as we can see, we are using a function sysdate, which retains the system date where the database exists. The default value specified here after the default option is used during the insert statement. If you insert a record into the table here, emp underscore retired, and you don't specify a value for the retired underscore date, instead of using a null value, Oracle in this case will use the default value specified here, which is the sys date. So the default value specified here is used during the insert statement. If you don't specify a value for the column Oracle will use the default value instead of put a null value. Here we have a list of naming rules you have to follow during creating a database object. The database object must be 1 to 30 characters long, begin with a letter. You cannot create a database object, for example, table or view starts with number. Must begin with a letter. Contains only letters A to Z, either capital or small. Numbers from 0 to 9. You can also use underscore, $, and pound sign when you name an object. Not the same name as another object owned by the same user. You cannot, for example, create two tables called employees table owned by the same user. Not be an Oracle reserved word. Names are not case sensitive. That means if you create a table called capital employees or called small employees, it's the same thing. As a guideline, use descriptive names for database object. Give the object a meaningful name. So if you want to create a table that used to hold students information, you can call the table, for example, students, not XYZ. So in this lesson, we learned about tables and how to create a table using create table statement. I hope this video was informative for you, and thank you for watching.